He recognized her face, not from the office, not from a meeting or a conference or any of the contexts in which he recognized most faces. From a photograph he'd been carrying in his wallet for 30 years. She was crying. Back to him, one hand on the cart handle, the other pressed flat against the window she'd been about to clean, shoulders doing the thing shoulders did when someone was trying to hold something in that was too large to hold. She didn't know he was there. The office had been dark when she came in. She'd turned on only the work light above the window, the minimum required to see what she was cleaning, not enough to see him at the desk in the corner. He hadn't moved, hadn't turned on the overhead, hadn't said anything. He'd been watching for 4 minutes and hadn't done any of those things because in 30 years of closing deals and solving problems and walking into rooms that required action, he had never learned how to walk into a room where someone was breaking and not try to fix it. And he could see, from the way she was standing, from the way she was keeping it small, from the way her free hand pressed flat against the glass like she needed something solid, that fixing was not what this was. He stood up, he walked to the door, he knocked. She spun around, saw him, and said the thing he hadn't expected. "This is the only place I can do this," she said. "Please just let me have this." She hadn't planned to cry tonight. She never planned to cry anywhere. Planning required the belief that crying was something that happened on a schedule, that grief and exhaustion, and the specific accumulated weight of 2 jobs and 1 income and 16 years of doing the math alone arrived at predictable intervals and could be prepared for. They didn't. They arrived when they arrived. Tonight, they arrived at 1:04 a.m. in the 43rd floor of Meridian Tower, in the office of someone she'd never met, while she was about to clean a window that overlooked a city that was completely indifferent to what she was carrying. She'd gotten the call at 12:47. "Diego, Mom, the program sent a follow-up. The deposit is due in 10 days. For $800. She'd been in the hallway outside suite 4300 when the call came. She'd answered because Diego called after midnight only when something was important, and because she'd trained herself over 16 years to always answer when something was important regardless of what she was doing. "I know," she'd said. "I know you know," Diego had said. I wanted to tell you in case there was something we could do." "There is," she'd said. "I'm figuring it out." She said everything she wasn't sure about, directly, without hesitation, with the full weight of her voice behind it. Because Diego was 16, and he was watching her the way 16-year-olds watch their parents, for evidence about what was possible, for proof that the thing he wanted was reachable, for the specific, unspoken reassurance that his mother had not run out of ways. She had not run out of ways. She just hadn't found the next one yet. She'd hung up. She'd stood in the hallway for a moment. Then she'd pushed the cart into suite 4300, which was dark, had been dark every night she'd cleaned it. The CEO always gone by 9. The office, the specific, immaculate emptiness of a space used hard during the day and abandoned completely at night. And had turned on the work light above the window and had started with the glass. She always started with the glass. Not because the building required it, because glass showed everything, every smear, every fingerprint, every mark left by the day. And starting with the thing that showed everything meant she knew exactly what she was dealing with before she moved to the things that hid more easily. She was 4 strokes into the window when it came. Not gradually. All at once, the call in Diego's voice, and 4 800s in 10 days. And the math she'd done standing in the hallway that had not produced a good answer, arriving simultaneously with the specific physical exhaustion of a woman who had been awake since 5:30 and would not be home until 3:30 and would be back at the register by 7, and who had been carrying this particular weight since the acceptance letter and had been arrived 6 weeks ago and had been carrying it alone because there was no one else to carry it with. Her hand stopped on the glass. She pressed it flat. Something to hold on to while the rest of her caught up. She didn't make a sound. That was the discipline of it, she'd learned. In 8 months of cleaning offices that were supposed to be empty, that sound traveled in ways that silence didn't. Cleaners who cried loudly got noticed. Cleaners who kept it small stayed invisible. She needed to stay invisible tonight. This was the only place she had. Not the only place she cleaned. She had 6 offices on this floor, 2 on 38, and the lobby which took 40 minutes on its own. But the only place she allowed herself this. Suite 4300. The corner office. The one with the view of the lake and the work light that was warm, instead of fluorescent, and the specific quality of emptiness that felt, at 1A. Like permission. Not permission? From anyone. From herself. She'd found it by accident 3 months ago, had come in after a particularly hard week, 2 shifts back to back, a bill she hadn't accounted for, and had stood at this window and understood that she was not going to make it to the cart before something gave way. She'd let it give way. She'd stood at the window and let it happen, and had then wiped her face and finished the office and moved to the next one and the next one. It had worked. It had been working. She'd been using the window in Suite 4300 for 3 months. She'd never considered that someone might still be there. When the knock came, she spun around. The man at the glass door was backlit by the hallway, light, tall, jacket, the silhouettes of someone who had been at a desk and had stood up. She couldn't see his face clearly. She could see that he was there, and that he'd been there, and that he'd been watching. How long? How much? She didn't know. She knew the feeling of being seen doing the one thing she'd allowed herself to do unseen. The specific, exposed feeling of a person caught in the only private moment they'd carved out of an entirely public life. She didn't reach for composure. She reached for the truth. "This is the only place I can do this," she said. "Please just let me have this." He didn't say anything. He didn't come in. He stood at the door with his hand still raised from the knock. She looked at him. He looked at her. He lowered his hand. He didn't leave. He didn't come in. He just stayed at the door. Present without pressing. Available without demanding. She hadn't expected that. She'd expected an apology, an awkward retreat, a human resources problem in the making. She hadn't expected a man to knock on a door and then simply wait outside it. She looked at him for a moment. Then she turned back to the window. She finished the stroke she'd started. She kept working. And he stayed at the door. He hadn't meant to stay. The knock had been instinct. 30 years of entering rooms had produced a man who knocked before entering and entered after knocking. That was the sequence. That was how it worked. Except she'd said, "Please just let me have this," and the sequence had stopped. He was still at the door. She'd turned back to the window. She was cleaning it. Not performing normalcy, actually cleaning. The stroke resuming where it had stopped. The specific practiced efficiency of someone who had a system and was returning to it, because the system was what kept things moving when everything else was uncertain. He watched her work. He thought about leaving. He didn't leave. He thought about what he would say if he went in. Everything he came up with was wrong. "Are you okay?" She was clearly not okay, and the question would require her to say she was, and she'd already spent enough energy tonight on things that weren't true. "Is there anything I can do?" He didn't know what she needed, and offering to do something unspecified was offering nothing while appearing to offer something. "I'm sorry for interrupting," he was, but saying so centered him in a moment that wasn't about him. He stayed at the door. He had been a man who solved things for 30 years. Meridian Capital. $2 billion in assets, 407 employees. A reputation built on the specific, reliable ability to walk into complicated situations and make them less complicated. He was standing at a glass door at 111A, unable to make anything less complicated. The irony was not lost on him. He looked at her hands, moving across the glass. The motion so practiced it required no conscious attention. She was somewhere else, while her hands did what her hands knew how to do. He recognized that. He'd spent years in rooms where his body executed the meeting while his mind was somewhere else entirely, running the numbers that mattered while his mouth produced the words the room required. He knew what it looked like when someone had separated their hands from the rest of themselves. He also knew what she was carrying while she did it. He knew because he'd been at his desk when she called her son. He hadn't meant to hear it. The office had been quiet, the deal documents open, the calls done, the specific silence of a floor where everyone else had gone home hours ago. He'd been reading a clause for the fourth time when the cart had come down the hallway and he'd heard her voice. Not the words initially. The register. The register of a mother telling her child something was going to be fine. He knew that register. His own mother had used it. 3 times that he could specifically remember. Once when his father lost his job. Once when they'd had to move. Once when she'd found a lump and hadn't told him what it was for 2 weeks because she'd needed to know herself first before she could manage what it would cost him to know. There is. I'm figuring it out. He'd heard those words clearly. He'd heard the pause before them, the half-second of a woman doing math in her head and not finding the answer and deciding that the answer was not what her son needed from her right now. He'd heard that pause too. He knew what it cost. He looked at the photograph in his wallet. He'd taken it out when he heard the cart, not because he'd planned to, because some habits were older than plans. He'd carried it for 30 years. He looked at it when things were hard. Not for comfort exactly, for orientation. For the reminder that there had been a moment when everything was uncertain and someone had stopped anyway. Roberto Reyes, Chicago. Winter, 1994. Nathan had been 22. 3 months into the city, 6 weeks out of money, standing on the corner of Wabash and Madison at 7 in the morning because standing on a corner felt better than sitting in the apartment where the heat had been off for 4 days. He hadn't been crying. He'd been past crying. Past was a specific place, somewhere on the other side of the thing, where even the release of it felt like too much to spend. Roberto had been walking past. 50s. Work coat. The look of a man going somewhere specific at a specific time who had looked up at the wrong moment and seen something that made him stop. He'd stopped. He hadn't said much. He'd asked Nathan if he'd eaten. Nathan had said yes. Roberto had looked at him for a moment, the specific, accurate look of someone who understood that yes was not the truth and had taken out his wallet. He'd given Nathan $200. Not pressed into his hand with averted eyes, the specific pantomime of charity, handed to him directly, like a transaction between two people who were both fully present. You'll figure it out, Roberto had said. But eat first. He'd walked on. Nathan had stood on the corner and held the money and understood that something had just happened that he didn't have language for yet. That a man who owed him nothing had stopped and seen him, not the situation, him, and had responded to what he saw without making it about himself. He'd eaten. He'd figured it out. 30 years later, he was standing at a glass door in a building he owned, looking at a woman whose shoulders carried the same weight he'd carried on that corner, and he still didn't have language for what was required. But he understood what it wasn't. It wasn't money handed to her in a hallway. It wasn't a solution offered before he understood the problem. It wasn't fixing. He looked at the photograph. The family picture Roberto had shown him once, not that day, a different day, weeks later, when they'd crossed paths again at a diner on State Street and Roberto had sat down uninvited, because Roberto was the kind of man who sat down uninvited in a way that felt like a gift rather than an intrusion. He'd shown Nathan the photograph from his wallet, his wife, his daughter. Small, maybe 5 or 6 in the photograph, dark hair, the specific expression of a child who had been asked to hold still for a camera and was doing so with focused reluctance. My Carmen, Roberto had said. She gets my stubbornness, her mother's sense. Better combination. Nathan had looked at the photograph and looked at the woman who was currently cleaning his window and understood why he'd been standing at this door for 7 minutes. It wasn't the stubbornness. It was the combination. Roberto's stubbornness. Her mother's sense. The specific way she'd turned back to the window and kept working after asking him to let her have the only place she had. That wasn't defeat. That was the combination Roberto had described. That was someone who knew what she was doing and was doing it even when the doing was hard. He put the photograph back in his wallet. He looked at the door, at his hand, at the woman on the other side of the glass who didn't know he recognized her from a photograph her father had shown a stranger in a diner in 1994. He knocked again, softly, not to come in, to let her know he was still there. She didn't turn around. but she stopped moving for 1 second. 1 second of stillness. Then she kept cleaning. He stayed at the door. She finished the window at 1:19. Not because she was done. She had 5 more surfaces in this office, the desk and the shelves, and the credenza and the small conference table, by the south wall and the glass partition that separated the main office from the anteroom. She had a system, and the window was first in the system, and she'd finished the window. She turned around. He was still there. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them said anything for a moment. She'd had 15 minutes to think about what she was going to say when she turned around. She used the 15 minutes to clean the window instead, because the window needed cleaning, and thinking about what to say to a man standing outside a door hadn't produced anything useful. "You can come in," she said. Not warmly, not coldly. The specific neutral register of someone making a practical decision. He opened the door. He came in. He didn't turn on the overhead light. She noted that. The work light was still on, warm, low. The light she'd chosen, because it was the minimum required, and also because it was the kind of light that didn't announce itself. He'd understood, somehow, that turning on the overhead would change what the room was. He stood near the door. Not at his desk, near the door, which put him closer to her than to the position of authority in the room. She noted that too. "I didn't know anyone was here," she said. "I know," he said. "I heard your cart and I should have said something." "I didn't." "Why not?" He looked at his hands. "Because I was reading something for the 4th time and I didn't want to interrupt the system," he said. "And then I heard your call." She was very still. "How much?" she said. "Enough," he said. "I'm sorry." She looked at the window she'd just cleaned. At the city beyond it, Chicago at 1:19 in the morning. Still running, the specific restless energy of a city that didn't fully stop. The lights on the lake, the traffic on Lakeshore Drive, the indifferent enormity of a place that contained everything she needed and made her work 2 jobs to afford the edges of it. "You own this building," she said. Not a question. She'd seen his name on the building directory 8 months ago when she started. Nathan Cole. Suite 4300. "Yes," he said. "I've been cleaning this office for 8 months, she said. "I know," he said. "I looked at the service records when," he stopped. "When you were standing at the door," she said. "Yes," he said. She looked at him. "You don't know my name," she said. He was quiet. "No," he said. "Carmen," she said. "Carmen Reyes." Something happened to his face. Small, controlled. But there, the specific involuntary shift of someone receiving information that rearranges something. She saw it. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. "I'm sorry." "Carmen." She looked at him. The assessing look, fast, accurate, the look she'd developed over 16 years of reading situations that required reading. He wasn't nothing. "You recognized me," she said. "When you looked through the glass? Before you knocked?" He was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said. "From where?" she said. He reached into his jacket pocket. He took out his wallet. He opened it. He removed a photograph. Old, the edges soft with age, the color slightly faded in the way photographs faded when they were handled often. He held it out. She took it. She looked at it. A family. A man and a woman and a small girl, maybe 5 or 6, dark hair, the expression of a child holding still for a camera with focused reluctance. She knew the expression because it was hers. She knew the man because she had grown up that face at the kitchen table in the morning, and at the door when he came. He came home, and at her school plays, where he sat in the front row and cried without embarrassment, and at the hospital 3 years ago, where his face had been the last thing she'd seen before they told her to wait outside. She looked at the photograph for a long time. "Where did you get this?" she said. "Your father gave it to me," he said. "In 1994. At a diner on State Street." He paused. "We'd run into each other a few weeks after he stopped again. Found the right words. After he helped me, he sat down and showed me his family. He said, 'This is what I'm working for. That's a good reason to keep going.'" She looked at the photograph, at her father's face, at herself at 5 years old, not knowing she was being shown to a stranger who would carry her in his wallet for 30 years. "He helped you," she said. "Yes," he said. "How?" she said. He was quiet. Not from reluctance, from the specific care of someone choosing the right words for something that had been true for a long time and had never been said out loud. I was 22, he said, new to Chicago, out of money. Standing on a corner at 7 in the morning because standing felt better than the alternative. He paused. He stopped. He asked if I'd eaten. I said yes. He looked at me for a moment and then he gave me $200 and he said, "You'll figure it out, but eat first." She looked at the photograph. At her father's face at whatever age he'd been, in 1994, early 40s, the work coat he'd worn until it wore through, the expression she recognized as his public expression, the one that didn't show what was happening underneath. He never told me that, she said. I don't think he would have, Nathan said. It wasn't that kind of thing for him. It was just the next thing. Someone needed something, and he had it. She looked at the city outside the window, at the lights on the lake. She thought about her father, about the way he'd moved through the world, not loudly, not with the expectation of acknowledgement, with the specific, quiet confidence of someone who had decided what kind of person they were going to be, and was being it without needing anyone to notice. She'd tried to learn that. She was still learning it. He died 3 years ago, she said. Nathan was quiet. I know, he said. I found out. I've been trying to find him for a long time. To tell him. He looked at the photograph in her hands. I never got to. She looked at him. At the man who had been carrying her father's photograph for 30 years. Who had been standing at this door for 7 minutes because he didn't know how to walk into a room where someone was breaking and not try to fix it. Who had knocked anyway. Who had stayed. She looked at the photograph one more time. Then she held it out to him. He shook his head. Keep it, he said. It was always yours. She looked at it. At herself at 5 years old in her father's wallet. At the city her father had come to so she could have something better than what he'd had. At the window, she'd just cleaned in an office belonging to a man her father had fed on a corner in 1994 because feeding people was just the next thing. She folded the photograph carefully. She put it in her jacket pocket, against her chest, the same place she kept Diego's acceptance letter. She went back to work. Not immediately, there was a moment, after she'd put the photograph in her pocket, where she stood at the window and looked at the city and didn't move. Not processing exactly. More like the specific stillness of someone who had received something significant and needed to let it settle before they could do anything else. Then she picked up the cloth. She moved to the desk. Nathan sat down. Not at his desk, in the chair across from it. The chair where clients sat. The chair that faced the window and the city and the work light and Carmen, moving through the office with the systematic efficiency of someone who had a sequence and was following it. He watched her work. She let him. Not because she decided he could, because she decided she wasn't going to change her sequence for him. The desk needed cleaning. She was cleaning it. He was in the room. Those three things could coexist. How long? He said. She didn't look up. 8 months, she said. Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays. I'm usually gone by 9, he said. I know, she said. You leave your coffee cup on the left side of the desk. The ring mark is always in the same place. She moved to the credenza. You read physical documents. There are always papers on the right side, never on the left. And you open the blinds in the morning and never close them, so I close them. He looked at the blinds. Closed. He'd never thought about who closed them. You know my office better than I do, he said. I know what you leave behind, she said. That's different. He thought about that. About the specific knowledge of someone who cleaned up after you. Not the knowledge of what you did, but the knowledge of what you left. The coffee cup, the papers, the blinds, the evidence of a day lived in a space, visible only to the person who came after. Diego, he said, your son. She stopped moving for 1 second, then continued. Yes, she said. The program he got into, he said. Northwestern. Pre-med. Summer program, she said. 8 weeks. It's competitive. They take 40 students from across the country. She moved to the conference table. He's wanted to be a doctor since he was 9. He used to take my blood pressure with a toy kit every morning before school. He almost smiled. What changed his mind from toys to Northwestern? he said. She looked at him. The assessing look, deciding if the question was real or conversational. She decided. His grandfather, she said. My father. Diego was 13 when he died. He was with him at the end. She moved the cloth in even strokes. After, he told me, I want to understand what happened. I want to know enough to help. She paused. He meant medically, but I think he meant more than that. Nathan looked at the window, at the city outside, at the reflection of the room in the dark glass, Carmen at the conference table, himself in the client chair, the work light making everything warm and specific. Your father, he said. What was he like? Beyond what I knew of him. She looked at him. Not with surprise, with the careful attention of someone deciding how much of a private thing to make public. She decided. Stubborn, she said. He had opinions about everything and was wrong about some of them and would never admit it. She almost smiled. He made the same 3 jokes his whole life. I heard them so many times I could feel them coming before he finished the setup. She moved to the last surface. He worked construction for 20 years. His hands looked like yours probably don't. He looked at his hands. She was right. He came to Chicago from San Antonio in 1989, she said. He always said Chicago was the city that told you the truth. That other cities let you pretend, but Chicago didn't. She looked out the window. I didn't understand what he meant until I'd been here long enough to understand it. What did he mean? Nathan said. That the city shows you exactly what it is and exactly what it costs, she said. And you decide if you can afford it. Not just money, all of it. She finished the last surface. He decided he could. Nathan was quiet. He thought about a man walking to work in a winter coat who had stopped on a corner because stopping was the next thing, who had given money to a stranger, not as charity, but as a transaction between 2 people who were both fully present, who had carried a photograph of his family in his wallet because that was what he was working for. He thought about what that man had known that most people didn't, not about money. About the specific, unglamorous arithmetic of showing up for people the way you wanted to show up. Not when it was convenient, not when it was comfortable, but when it was the next thing, and you had what was needed, and so you stopped. He knew something, Nathan said, about how to be in the world. Carmen looked at him. He knew a lot of things, she said. He also thought the Cubs were going to win the World Series every year until they actually did, and was insufferable about being right. Nathan laughed. Not the managed laugh of a professional interaction, the real kind, unexpected, coming from somewhere below the place where managed things lived. Carmen looked at him. At the laugh. Eat the man sitting in the client chair at 1:34 a.m., laughing about her father's baseball opinions. Something shifted. Not dramatically. A small shift, the specific adjustment of 2 people who have been in the same room for long enough and with enough honesty that the room has become something different from what it was when they started. She sat down, not across from him at the end of the conference table, close enough for conversation, far enough to maintain what she needed to maintain. The $800, she said. He looked at her. I'm not asking you for it, she said. I want to be clear about that. I know, he said. I'm telling you because you heard the call and you're sitting there knowing about it and not saying anything. And that's its own kind of weight, she said. So I'm saying it out loud. Four's $800. 10 days. I don't have it and I'm going to figure it out. How? He said. Not let me help. Not I can fix this. How? She looked at him. At the man who had learned something from her father 30 years ago and had been carrying it in his wallet since. At the man who had knocked on a door and then waited outside it. At the man who had asked how instead of offering let me. I have $2, $100 saved, she said. I'm going to call the program tomorrow and ask for a payment plan. If they say yes, I can cover the first half and work the second. She paused. If they say no, I'm going to look at a personal loan. The interest is bad, but it's manageable if I restructure the grocery budget for 3 months. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer. He listened the way her father had looked, long enough to see what was actually there. You've already done the math, he said. I do the math when I'm cleaning, she said. This office has been very productive. He looked at the surfaces she'd cleaned, the desk, the credenza, the conference table, the shelves, the window with the city beyond it. All of it done while she was somewhere else in her head, running numbers, building plans, doing the specific invisible work of a person who had never had the luxury of not thinking 3 steps ahead. Carmen, he said. Yes, she said. Your father stopped for me because stopping was the next thing, he said. He didn't calculate it. He didn't weigh the cost. He saw what was there and he did the next thing. She looked at him. I've been trying to figure out for 30 years how to do what he did, Nathan said. How to see what's actually there instead of what I'm looking for. He paused. I'm not very good at it yet. No, she said. He looked at her. You stood outside the door for 7 minutes, she said. My father would have knocked in 30 seconds. I know, he said. But you knocked, she said. Yes, he said. She looked at the table, at the surfaces she'd cleaned, at the room that had been her private place and was now something else, not worse, different. A room where something had happened that she hadn't planned and that she was still deciding what to do with. I need to finish the floor, she said. Okay, he said. He didn't move. She got up. She got the mop from the cart. She started on the floor. He sat in the client chair and watched the city and didn't say anything. And for the first time in 8 months, 2 people were in this room at the same time, and both of them knew the other was there. She finished the floor at 1:52. Not just this office, the floor of this office, which was the hardest floor on the 43rd because it was marble, and marble showed everything. And the mop had to go in one direction only, or it left streaks and streaks meant doing it again. She'd done it twice in her first week. She hadn't done it twice since. Nathan watched her work. Not continuously, he'd gone back to his documents twice, had made one call in a low voice that lasted 4 minutes, had returned each time to the client chair, as though the client chair had become the place he was supposed to be in this room. She noticed. She didn't say anything about it. At 1:52, she put the mop back on the cart. She sat down at the end of the conference table. Not because the conversation required it. Because she had 6 minutes before she needed to move to the next office. And 6 minutes was enough time to sit. She sat. He looked at her. The payment plan, he said. Have you asked before? The program? No, she said. Diego got the acceptance 6 weeks ago. I've been trying to close the gap another way first. What other ways? He said. She looked at him, at the man asking how again. Still not let me, she answered. I picked up 2 extra shifts in January, she said. The cleaning company has overflow work, other buildings, special events. I took everything available. She looked at her hands. That got me $340. He nodded. I sold the car, she said. He looked at her. A 2009 Civic, she said. It needed work I couldn't afford to do. I got $800 for it as is. She paused. I take 2 buses to the register job now. 43 minutes each way. The overnight cleaning I can get to on the L. You sold your car, he said. It was a liability, she said. The $800 was more useful than a car that needed $900 in repairs. He was quiet. She knew what he was doing, the math. Adding $340 and $1, $800 to the $100 she'd mentioned. Coming up with the same number she'd been coming up with for 6 weeks. Forwarder, $240, $560, short, $560, said. Yes, she said. 6 weeks of trying, he said. Yes, she said, and the payment plan is the next step, he said. If they say yes, I pay half now, half in 30 days. I can cover the second half if I take the January overtime again in February. She looked at the window. It's tight, but it's there. And if they say no? Personal loan, she said. I've already identified 2 options, one at 11, 4% over 18 months, one at 13, 1% over 12. I'd take the first, the longer timeline keeps the monthly payment manageable while I'm carrying both jobs. He looked at her. You've done all of this, he said, in the last 6 weeks. I do the math when I'm cleaning, she said again. I've cleaned a lot of floors. He was quiet for a moment. Carmen, he said. I'm not asking, she said. I know, he said. I'm not offering. He paused. I'm asking you something. She looked at him. The building, he said. The cleaning contract. Do you know who manages it? Apex Facility Services, she said. They contract with the building. And your rate, he said. Per hour. She looked at him. Not with suspicion, with the specific, careful attention of someone who understood that questions had directions, and she needed to know the direction before she answered. $17. 40, she said. He was quiet. She knew what he was thinking because she'd thought it herself in the first week, when she'd looked at the rate and looked at the building and understood the specific arithmetic of what it meant to clean a building like this for $17. 40 an hour. The building management fee, he said. What Apex charges for the contract, I don't know the exact number, but I know the category. It's not $17, 40 whites. No, she said, it's not. The gap between what they charge and what they pay, he said, is the business model, she said. Yes. He looked at the floor she'd just cleaned, at the marble that showed everything, at the work she'd done for 6 minutes that would last until the next morning when people walked across it without looking down. I want to ask you something, he said, and I want you to answer honestly. Not because I'm going to do anything with the answer tonight, because I want to understand something I haven't understood before. She looked at him. What would change it? He said. Not tonight. Not the $560. The actual structure. If you could change one thing about the way this kind of building, operates, what would it be? She looked at the floor. At 16 years of doing the math in rooms where the math was always someone else's, she answered. Direct employment, she said. Not contract. The building employs the cleaners directly. No Apex in the middle taking the margin. Same work. Better rate, benefits. She paused. Apex takes somewhere between 35 and 40% of what the building pays for cleaning services. That margin, distributed directly to the workers, would change the math significantly. How significantly? He said. At 35% margin elimination, assuming the building pays Apex $28 per hour per worker, direct employment would mean a rate closer to $26. She looked at her hands. That's not a number I made up. I've been doing that math for 8 months. He looked at her. In this office, he said. Mostly, she said. The marble takes longer. More time to think. He looked at the floor. At the math that had been done on it while he was home. The other buildings in the portfolio, he said. There are 14. I know, she said. I looked up the Meridian Capital portfolio in March. I wanted to understand the scale. Why? Because understanding the scale tells you whether a change is possible or whether it's just an idea, she said. 14 buildings. Cleaning contracts averaging, I estimated, $180,000 annually each. That's $2. 5 Lingley's in cleaning contracts across the portfolio. At a 35% contractor margin, approximately $875 going to Apex that could go to workers instead. He was very still. $875, he said. Estimate, she said. I don't have access to the actual contract text. No, he said, but you're not far off. She looked at him. You've seen the contracts, she said. I signed them, he said. She nodded, not satisfied, not vindicated. Just accurate. The same way she received everything accurate. I never looked at what was on the other side of the number, he said. Most people don't, she said. That's not an excuse, he said. No, she said. It's not. He looked at the portfolio number on his screen. At the cleaning contract line item, he'd approved 14 times across 14 buildings without once thinking about what $17. 40 an hour looked like from the other side. If I restructured the contracts, he said. Direct employment. Across the portfolio. You'd need an HR infrastructure to support it, she said. That's a cost. But the margin you'd stop paying to Apex more than covers it if you do it at scale. She paused. I worked that out in February. It's in my head. I can write it down if you want. He looked at her. At the woman who had been doing his company's labor analysis on his office floor while he was home. Why didn't you tell anyone? He said. She looked at him, the flat, accurate look. Who would I tell? She said. He had no answer. Because the answer was no one. Not because no one would listen, because the structure of the building meant that the person who cleaned the floor was not the person who got to speak about what the floor cost. Those were different categories, different worlds, different hours of the day. He'd built the structure. He hadn't thought about what it prevented. Carmen, he said. Yes, she said. Write it down, he said. The analysis. Everything you've worked out. I want to see it. She looked at him. Why? She said. Because it's better than anything my operations team has produced, he said. And because you did it on my floor, and I should have been asking for it a long time ago. She was quiet. She thought about her father, about you'll figure it out. But eat first, about the specific, uncomplicated way Roberto had moved through the world, seeing what was there, doing the next thing, not requiring the situation to be organized in a particular way before he acted. Nathan was not her father. He was a man who had stood outside a door for 7 minutes. But he'd knocked. And he was asking how. And he was not saying, let me. I'll write it down, she said. She stood up. She looked at the clock. She had 4 more offices. I have to go, she said. I know, he said. She picked up the cart handle. She stopped. Nathan, she said. He looked at her. The $560, she said. I'm going to figure it out. I know, he said. I wasn't telling you so you'd fix it, she said. I know, he said. I was telling you because my father fed you on a corner in 1994, and you've been carrying that in your wallet for 30 years, and he never got to know what it became. She looked at the photograph in her pocket. She couldn't see it, but she knew it was there. Now he does. Nathan looked at her. She pushed the cart out the door, the wheels on the marble. The sound he'd heard every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday for 8 months without once thinking about what made it. He listened to it now, all the way down the hall, until it was gone. He stayed in the office until 3:15. Not working, the documents were still open on his screen, but he wasn't reading them. He was thinking about $875, $1,000, and $17. 40 and a woman who had done his company's labor analysis on his office floor while he was home sleeping. He was thinking about what he'd built without knowing what he'd built. At 3:15, he heard the cart again. Coming back down the hall, the return pass, the end of the shift, the specific sound of equipment being moved toward the service elevator. He stood up. He went to the door. She was at the cart. Jacket on now, the shift was ending. The building cold in the specific way. Buildings were cold at 3 in the morning when the HVAC had cycled down. She didn't see him immediately. Then she did. She stopped. Still here, she said. Still here, he said. She looked at the documents visible through the glass wall behind him. The deal, she said. It closes at 8. Yes, he said. You haven't slept, she said. No, he said. She looked at him. At the man who had been in this building since 7 the previous morning. 20 hours. The specific, accumulated exhaustion of someone who had been running at full capacity for a long time and had not stopped. She recognized it. She felt it every day. Go home, she said. Sleep 2 hours. You'll close the deal better rested. He almost smiled. I know, he said. I paused. I wanted to ask you something first. She waited. The analysis, he said. The labor restructuring. When you wrote it out, how long would that take? She thought about it. I have it in my head, she said. Getting it on paper, formatted so it's useful, 2 hours. Maybe 3. When do you sleep? He said. 3:30 to 7:30, she said. Then the register shift starts. He looked at her. At the woman who slept 4 hours between a cleaning shift and a cashier shift, and had spent part of those hours doing labor analysis in her head for a company that didn't know her name. I'm not asking you to do it tonight, he said, or this week. Then when, she said. When you have time, he said. Real time. Not the gaps between things. She looked at him. I don't have real time, she said. I have gaps. I know, he said. That's what I want to change. She was quiet. The hallway was very still around them. The building at 3:15 in the morning. The specific suspended quality of a large space between its night version and its day version, belonging to neither, occupied only by the people whose jobs existed in the gap. What does that mean? She said. Specifically. He'd known she would ask specifically. He'd been thinking about specifically since 1:52. I want to bring you in, he said. Formally. As a consultant. On the labor restructuring analysis. Paid at a rate that reflects what the work is worth, not what the gap between your shifts allows. He paused. And I want to restructure the cleaning contracts across the portfolio. Direct employment. The model you described. She looked at him. That's two things, she said. Yes, he said. The consulting, she said. What does that look like practically? I have two jobs. You'd have one, he said. The consulting rate would cover what both jobs currently pay. More than cover. She was quiet. Not processing, absorbing. The specific stillness is of someone receiving information that changes the practical architecture of their life and needs a moment to understand what the new architecture looks like. You're offering me a job, she said. I'm offering you the job you've already been doing, he said, for pay. She looked at the cart, at the mop, the cleaning supplies, the equipment she'd been moving through this building 3 nights a week for 8 months. The other cleaners, she said, in this building, across the portfolio. The restructuring would apply to all of them, he said. How many? She said. 43 in this building, he said. 218 across the portfolio. She did the math. She always did the math. 218 people. At a rate increase from $17.40 to approximately $26 if his margin estimates were accurate. A difference of $8.60 per hour. At 40 hours per week, 50 weeks per year. $200 per person annually. $3. 75 million are across the portfolio. Not a rounding error. That's significant, she said. Yes, he said. The board will have questions, she said. Yes, he said. What will you tell them? She said. He thought about it. About what Roberto had known that he'd been trying to learn for 30 years. About seeing what was actually there. About doing the next thing when you had what was needed. That the model was incomplete, he said. We were measuring the cost of the contract. We weren't measuring the cost of the gap between the contract and the worker. He paused. Once you see that gap, you can't unsee it. She looked at him. You saw it tonight, she said. I saw it tonight, he said. You've been seeing it for 8 months. Longer, she said. Every job I've had. The gap is always there. She looked at the cart. Most people don't look at what's on the other side of the contract. I know, he said. I was one of them. She looked at him. The assessing look, reading for the gap between what was said and what was meant. She didn't find one. I want to ask you something, she said. Ask, he said. Why does it take this? She said. A photograph in your wallet and a woman crying in your office at 1 in the morning. Why does it take this for someone to look? He was quiet. It was the right question. The question underneath all the other questions. Not about the contracts or the rates or the restructuring, but about the system that made it possible for a man to build 14 buildings and sign 43 cleaning contracts and never once think about the person on the other side of the mop. Because the system makes it easy not to, he said. The contract is with Apex. Apex manages the workers. I manage the contract. Everyone manages their piece, and no one is responsible for the whole. He paused. And I used that, not maliciously. Conveniently. She looked at the floor, at the marble she'd cleaned. Convenient, she said. That's the word. Yes, he said. It's convenient not to know the name of the person who cleans your office, she said. It's convenient to have a contract that puts someone between you and them. It's convenient to have them come at 1 in the morning when you're not there. She looked at him. The inconvenience was always on one side. Yes, Ed. And it took a photograph, she said. Yes, he said. She was quiet. He was quiet. The hallway still around them. The building between versions of itself. My father didn't need a photograph, she said. He just looked. I know, he said. I'm slower. But you're looking now, she said. Yes, he said. She looked at the cart, at the shift that was ending, at the 4 hours of sleep between now and the register. The consulting, she said. The analysis. I'll do it. Okay, he said. Not because of Diego, she said. I want to be clear about that. I know, he said, because 218 people deserve to have someone who knows what the gap looks like explain it to someone who can close it, she said. That's the work. Diego is separate. I understand, he said. Good, she said. She started moving the cart toward the service elevator. He walked with her. Not because she needed him to, because walking with her was the next thing. At the elevator, she pressed the button. They waited. Nathan, she said. Yes, she said. Diego's program, she said. I'm going to call them tomorrow about the payment plan. Okay, he said. If they say no, she said, I'm going to take the loan at 4%. Okay, he said. I'm not asking you to do anything about that, she said. I know, he said. The elevator came. She pushed the card in. She turned around. You should go home, she said. Close the deal. Yes, he said. And Nathan, she said. Yes, he said. Learn the names, she said, of the people who clean your buildings, all of them, not as a policy. Just learn them. The elevator doors closed. He stood in the hallway. He looked at the floor, at the marble that showed everything. He took out his phone. He sent one email to his operations director. 4 words. Who cleans our buildings? He put his phone in his pocket. He went back to his office. He closed the deal at 8. He slept first. The email had 43 replies by 9. Not to Nathan directly. To his operations director, Sandra Kim, who had forwarded the original 4 words to the building management team at 6:15 and had received. Over the following 3 hours, the specific varied responses of people who had been asked a question they hadn't expected and were answering it with different degrees of certainty. Some knew immediately. Some had to check. 3 said they'd get back to her. Sandra put the full list on Nathan's desk at 9:12, 2 minutes after the deal closed. 43 names. He read them slowly, not as an audit. As names, the specific ordinary names of people who had been moving through his building 3 nights a week for months and years. And in some cases he saw from the tenure column Sandra had added for 7 years. 7 years. Someone had been cleaning this building for 7 years, and he hadn't known their name until 4 words sent at 3 in the morning. He read until he got to R. Reyes Carmen. Tenure, 8 months. Building, Meridian Tower, 43rd floor. He put the list down. He picked up his phone. He called Sandra. The list, he said, all 14 buildings. I want the same thing. Names, tenure, current rate. A pause. That's 218 people, Sandra said. I know, he said. Nathan, can I ask what this is about? He thought about a hallway at 3 in the morning. About a woman who had done his company's labor analysis on his office floor. About a man on a corner in 1994 who had stopped because stopping was the next thing. I've been managing a contract, he said. I should have been managing a relationship. I'm correcting that. Sandra was quiet for a moment. I'll have the full list by end of day, she said. Thank you, he said. He hung up. He looked at the floor. At the marble. At the work that had been done on it last night while he was in the corner reading a clause for the 4th time. He opened a new document. He typed at the top, what we don't see determines what we don't fix. He looked at it. Then he typed what came next. Not a memo, not a policy proposal, the specific working notes of someone who had understood something the night before and was trying to capture it before the day made it abstract again. The cleaning contracts across the portfolio route approximately $875 annually to Apex Facility Services as contractor margin. This margin does not represent a service Apex provides that we couldn't provide internally. It represents the cost of not looking. He stopped. Read it back. The cost of not looking. That was the line. Not inefficiency. Not mismanagement. Not a bad deal. The cost of a system designed so that the person who built the building and the person who cleaned it never had to be in the same room at the same time. He built that system. He'd benefited from it. He was going to dismantle it. His HR director, James Okafor, came in at 10. James had been with Meridian for 9 years. He was the kind of person who asked questions before he agreed to things, not obstructively, from the genuine understanding that agreeing to things without understanding them was how organizations made expensive mistakes. He sat down. He looked at the notes Nathan had sent him at 9:30. He looked at Nathan. Direct employment, he said. Across the portfolio. Yes, Nathan said. 218 people, James said. Yes, Nathan said. The infrastructure cost, James said. HR, payroll, benefits administration, that's not nothing. I know, Nathan said. Run the numbers. I want to see the full cost of direct employment against the current contract spend. I can tell you now that the infrastructure cost won't fully offset the margin We're currently paying Apex, James said. There'll be a net cost increase. How much? Nathan said, estimate? $200, us to 300, us annually across the portfolio. James paused. Against threes. $2 billion as in assets. Nathan looked at him. That's what we've been saving by not looking, he said. 200 to 300. James was quiet. Yes, he said. That's what it comes to. Nathan thought about $200, about what $200,000 looked like from the other side of the mop. About 218 people and $8, 60 an hour, and the specific, invisible arithmetic of a system that had been designed, not maliciously, conveniently, to put distance between the people who owned the building and the people who kept it clean. Build the model, Nathan said. Full direct employment. Benefits, health, dental, paid leave. I want to see what it looks like when we stop paying for the distance. James wrote it down. Timeline, he said. How long to implement? Nathan said. Properly, 6 months. You'd need to notify Apex, negotiate contract termination, build the HR infrastructure, onboard 218 employees. Start today, Nathan said. James looked at him. The board, he started. I'll handle the board, Nathan said. Start today. James nodded. He stood up. He went to the door. James, Nathan said. He turned. The 43 people in this building, Nathan said. I have the list. I want to schedule 30-minute conversations with each of them. Me directly. Not HR, not building management. He paused. Before we implement anything, I want to talk to the people it affects. James looked at him. That's 43 conversations, he said. I know, Nathan said. Schedule them. James said, they work nights. Then I work nights? Nathan said. Schedule them. James left. Nathan looked at the list. 43 names. He started at the top. He read each one. Not as a data point, as a name. As a person who had been moving through this building, doing work that made the building function, earning $17. 40 an hour for the privilege of being invisible. He read until he got to Reyes, Carmen. He stopped there for a moment. He thought about her father. About Roberto standing on a corner and looking at a 22-year-old who was past the place where even crying felt like too much to spend. About you'll figure it out. But eat first. About the specific, uncomplicated clarity of a man who saw what was there and did the next thing. Nathan had been trying to learn that for 30 years. He was still learning it. But he was learning it in a different direction now. Not learning to give, learning to look, looking first. Everything else came from that. He picked up his phone. He called Carmen. She answered on the third ring. The sound of a grocery store in the background. Registers, announcements. The specific ambient noise of a place running at full volume. It's Nathan, he said. A pause. I'm at work, she said. I know. I'll be quick. Okay, she said. The program, he said. Northwestern. The $800. I called them this morning, she said. They said yes to the payment plan. He was quiet for a moment. Good, he said. I told you I'd figure it out, she said. I know, he said. I called because I wanted to know. A pause, shorter than he expected. Thank you, she said, for calling. The consulting, he said. When you're ready, no rush. I'll write it up this weekend, she said. Diego has a study group Saturday morning. I'll have 3 hours. 3 hours is enough, he said. For the outline, she said. The full analysis will take longer. Take the time it takes, he said. A register beeped in the background. I have to go, she said. One more thing, he said. Yes, she said. The 43 people in this building, he said. I'm going to talk to all of them. Before we change anything. I want to know what they know. She was quiet. What made you decide that? She said. He thought about it. About a woman who had asked, who would I tell, and had not had an answer. About a system built so that the person with the knowledge and the person with the power were never in the same room at the same time. About what happened when they were. Someone told me that understanding what's actually there requires talking to the people who are actually there, he said. I should have been doing it for 9 years. A pause. Who told you that? She said. You did, he said. Last night. You just didn't say it directly. She was quiet for a moment. Then, my father would have said it directly. I know, he said. I'm still learning, yes, she said. But you're learning. The register beeped again. She hung up. He sat at his desk. He looked at the list, 43 names. He picked up his pen. He started at the top. He read each name out loud, not for anyone, for himself. Because names said out loud were different from names on a page. Because the distance between a name on a page and a person in a hallway was the distance he was trying to close. He read all 43. Then he started on the other buildings. The board meeting was on a Thursday. Not the regular quarterly, Nathan had called a special session. One item on the agenda. No pre-read distributed, because pre-reads got read with the specific, managed attention of people preparing positions rather than receiving information. He wanted them to receive information first. He'd asked Sandra to set up the room differently. Not the long conference table with the chairs facing the screen. The round table from the smaller meeting room, moved in, chairs equal distance from the center, no head and no foot. His board chair, Eleanor Voss, had looked at the room when she arrived, and then looked at Nathan. What is this? She said. A different kind of meeting, he said. She sat down. 9 board members. The specific assembled weight of people who had built and funded and governed things and who had walked into this building for years without thinking about who cleaned it. Nathan stood. He didn't use the screen. I want to tell you something that happened 3 nights ago, he said. And then I want to show you something. And then I want to talk about what we're going to do. He told them about Carmen. Not everything, not the photograph, not Roberto, not the specific private weight of what had happened in that office. The part that was theirs to know, a woman who cleaned this building for 8 months, $17, 40 an hour, 2 jobs, a son in a pre-med program, an analysis she'd done in her head on their office floors, because there was no one to tell and no structure for telling. He told them about $875,000, about the gap between what Apex charged and what Apex paid, about 218 people across 14 buildings who had been invisible by design. Then he put 1 page on the table. Not a report. A list. 43 names. The names of the people who cleaned this building. These are the people who make it possible for us to work here, he said. I didn't know any of them 3 days ago. I knew the contract. I knew the cost. I didn't know the names. The room was quiet. Eleanor looked at the list, at the names. How long have some of them been here? She said. The longest tenure is 7 years, Nathan said. 7 years, she said. Yes, he said. She looked at the list for a long moment. What are you proposing? She said. He told them. Direct employment across the portfolio. Health, dental, paid leave. Rate increase from $17.40 to approximately $26, pending the full analysis Carmen was writing. 43 conversations with the workers in this building before any change was implemented. The same in every building. Net cost increase, he said. $200 to $300 dollars annually, against $2 billion in assets. He paused. That's what we've been saving by not looking. The room was quiet. David Park, board member, private equity background, the specific focused skepticism of someone trained to find risk, looked at the numbers. The infrastructure cost, he said. HR, payroll, benefits, that's real. It's in the estimate, Nathan said. The $200 to $300 includes it. And the Apex contract termination, David said. There may be penalties. James is reviewing the contract, Nathan said. We'll know by end of week. The 6-month implementation timeline, David said. During that period, we're running dual costs, existing contract and building infrastructure simultaneously. Yes, Nathan said. That's a one-time cost. I can absorb it from discretionary. David looked at the list. At 43 names. He was quiet for a moment. Who put together the labor analysis? He said. Carmen Reyes, Nathan said. She's been doing it in her head for 8 months on our floors. I've engaged her as a consultant to formalize it. David looked at Nathan. The woman who cleans this building, he said. The woman who cleans this building, Nathan confirmed. The room was quiet. Not the silence of people who disagreed. The silence of people updating something. Eleanor looked at the list. The 43 conversations, she said. You said you'd have them before implementing anything. Yes, he said. Have you started? She said. I've scheduled them, he said. The first is tonight. Her name is Maria Chen. She's been here 4 years. Eleanor looked at him. Tonight, she said. Her shift starts at 11, he said. Eleanor picked up the list. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked around the table. I want to put a motion, she said, to approve the direct employment restructuring in principle, pending the full labor analysis and Apex contract review. She paused. And I want to add something to the motion. What? Nathan said. Every board member visits a shift, she said, before the restructuring implements. Not a tour, a shift. You sit in the building at 11 at night and you see what it looks like. Nathan looked at her. Seconded, said another board member before Eleanor had finished the sentence. The vote was 8-1. David Park voted yes. The one no came from a board member who had a scheduling conflict and wanted more time to review the Apex contract terms, a legitimate concern, noted for the record. 8-1. Nathan sat down. He looked at the list. At 43 names. At Maria Chen, 4 years, shift starting at 11. He thought about Carmen. About the specific, practiced efficiency of someone who had a sequence and returned to it even when things happened in the middle of it. About the analysis she'd done on his floors while he was home. About who would I tell and not having an answer. He thought about Roberto. About a man who had moved through the world by seeing what was there and doing the next thing. About what it meant to build something in that spirit. He'd built Meridian Capital in what he'd thought was that spirit. He understood now that he'd built the structure and had forgotten to look at what the structure made invisible. He was looking now. He was going to keep looking. Carmen's analysis arrived on a Monday, 14 pages. Not formatted, clean, direct, the specific clarity of someone who had been thinking about something for a long time and had finally been asked to write it down. He read it twice. Then he called her. It's good, he said. I know, she said. He almost smiled. The section on benefits, he said. The healthcare cost analysis. How did you? I've been navigating the healthcare market as a self-employed contractor for 6 years, she said. I know what it costs. It shows, he said. The numbers are conservative, she said. I used the lower end of the range because I wanted the case to be defensible, not optimistic. They're defensible, he said. Good, she said. He looked at page 9, the section she'd titled, What the Contract Doesn't Measure. He'd read it 3 times already. Page 9, he said. She was quiet. You wrote, the true cost of the current model is not found in the contract. It is found in what the contract makes unnecessary to see. When accountability is contracted out, so is visibility. And visibility is the precondition of everything else, of fair compensation, of safe conditions, of the basic recognition that the people doing the work are people. He stopped reading. Yes, that's the argument, he said. For the board, for everything. I know, she said. That's why I put it on page 9 instead of page 1. He looked at her. Why page 9? He said. Because if I put it on page 1, she said, people read it as a value statement and move on. If I put it on page 9, after all the numbers, it reads as a conclusion. Numbers first. Then what the numbers mean. He was quiet. Your father taught you that? He said. No, she said. 2 jobs in 16 years taught me that. My father taught me to show up. He looked at the analysis. At 14 pages of work, done in 3 hours on a Saturday morning while her son was at a study group. At the argument for 218 people written by one of them. Carmen, he said. Yes, she said. When the restructuring implements, he said. I'd like you to lead the worker transition team, helping the 218 people move from contract to direct employment, understanding what they need, making sure the process works for them, not just for us. She was quiet, a longer quiet than usual. That's a real job, she said. Yes, he said. With the consulting rate, she said. Better, he said. It's a full position. HR, benefits, the rate that reflects what the work is worth. She was quiet. He waited. I need to think about it, she said. Take the time you need, he said. I'll tell you Thursday, she said. Okay, she said. She hung up. He sat at his desk. He looked at page 9. At visibility is the precondition of everything else. He thought about a woman at a window at 1:04 a.m., pressing her hand flat against the glass. About a man who had stood outside a door for 7 minutes. About the specific distance between inside and outside and what it cost to cross it. He'd crossed it. He was still crossing it. That was the work. Not the restructuring, though the restructuring mattered. Not the analysis, though the analysis was necessary. Not the board vote or the 43 conversations or the list of names read out loud in an empty office at 3 in the morning. All of those were the work. But underneath them was something simpler. He'd looked. He was going to keep looking. That was what Roberto had known that he'd spent 30 years learning. You looked, then you did the next thing. Then you looked again. Carmen said yes on a Thursday, not by call. She came to the office, not the 43rd floor, the lobby. She texted from downstairs. I'm here. Come down. He came down. She was standing near the entrance in her work jacket, not the cleaning uniform, her own jacket. The distinction mattered and she'd made it deliberately. Yes, she said. I'll lead the transition team. Okay, he said. I have conditions, she said. Tell me, he said. The 218 people, she said. I talk to all of them before anything changes. Not HR, me. I need to know what they need before I tell you what they need. Yes, he said. And I keep the consulting, she said, separate from the staff role. The analysis is mine. If you use it beyond this portfolio, I want to know, he said. She looked at him. And Diego, she said. This has nothing to do with Diego. I know, he said. She nodded. She looked at the lobby. At the marble floor, different from the 43rd, the same material, the same work required to keep it clean. Who cleaned this floor last night? She said. He thought about it. He didn't know. Find out, she said. Learn that name first. She left. He stood in the lobby. He looked at the floor. He took out his phone. He called Sandra. The lobby, he said. Last night, he heard typing. Patricia Nguyen, Sandra said. 6 years. He looked at the floor Patricia Nguyen had cleaned for 6 years. Thank you, he said. He put his phone away. He said the name out loud. Patricia Nguyen. Then he went back upstairs. He had work to do. Subscribe if you're new. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments, whose name don't you know that you should? I read everyone. See you in the next story.